I knew something was wrong the moment I saw Linda Patterson standing on my front lawn with a clipboard, surrounded by half the neighborhood nodding along to whatever poison she was spewing. My coffee mug froze halfway to my lips as I watched through my living room window, counting at least 15 people clustered around her like she was some kind of suburban prophet. This was bad, really bad. I had moved to Meadowbrook Estates in Gilbert, Arizona just 8 months ago, thinking I had finally found the perfect place to settle down after my divorce. The community was beautiful, with palm trees lining the streets and Spanish-style homes that all looked magazine-ready. The HOA seemed reasonable enough during the buying process. Monthly dues were $200 and the rules appeared standard. No boats in driveways, keep your lawn maintained, no bright paint colors without approval. Simple stuff that made sense for maintaining property values. Linda Patterson was the HOA president, a title she wore like a crown. She was 52 years old with that specific haircut that practically screamed, "I want to speak to the manager," blonde highlights, shorter in the back, longer in the front. She drove a white Mercedes SUV with a "Live, Laugh, Love" bumper sticker, and she had opinions about everything. Everything. Within my first week in the neighborhood, she had knocked on my door 3 times. Once to welcome me with a packet of HOA rules that was literally 67 pages long. Once to inform me that my mailbox needed to be repainted because the black paint was too dark compared to the neighborhood standard. And once to let me know that my trash cans were visible from the street for approximately 47 minutes after the allowed time on Thursday morning. I had tried to be friendly, really tried. I painted the mailbox. I set alarms to bring in the trash cans. I even attended 2 HOA meetings, sitting through mind-numbing discussions about whether the community pool should be heated to 78 or 80 degrees. But Linda seemed to have it out for me specifically, and I could never figure out why. Maybe it was because I was a single guy in a neighborhood of families. Maybe it was because I worked from home as a software developer, and my irregular schedule meant I sometimes mowed my lawn at times she deemed inappropriate. Or maybe she was just a miserable person who needed someone to target, and I was the newest, easiest mark. Things had escalated 3 weeks ago when I installed solar panels on my roof. I had done everything by the book, submitted the architectural modification request, got approval from the committee, hired a licensed contractor, obtained all the permits from the city. The installation took 2 days and the panels looked great. They were going to cut my electric bill by 70%, which in Arizona summers was a huge deal. I was proud of them. Linda showed up the day after installation, face already red with fury. "Those panels are an eyesore," she had announced, not even bothering with a greeting. "They are completely inappropriate for the aesthetic of Meadowbrook Estates." "I got approval from the HOA Architectural Committee," I told her calmly, though my heart was already racing. Confrontation was not my strong suit. I have the paperwork inside if you want to see it. I do not care what some committee approved. I am the HOA president and I am telling you those panels are unacceptable. They need to come down immediately. Linda, they are not coming down. I spent $15,000 on this system. It is legal, permitted, and approved. Arizona has solar access laws that protect homeowners' rights to install solar panels. Her eyes had narrowed dangerously. "We will see about that, Mr. Chen, we will see." Now, 3 weeks later, here she was with a clipboard and a crowd, clearly making good on that threat. I set down my coffee and headed outside, my stomach churning with anxiety. As I approached, I could hear her voice carrying across the lawn. "And he is just so uncooperative," Linda was saying to Mrs. Rodriguez from 3 houses down. "He does not care about property values at all. Those hideous panels are bringing down the entire neighborhood. I have had them appraised, and every home on this street has lost at least $5,000 in value because of his selfishness." "That is completely untrue," I said loudly, causing the group to turn and face me. Several people had the decency to look uncomfortable at being caught gossiping. Others, though, looked at me with open hostility. Solar panels increase property values. Every study shows that. Linda's smile was pure venom. James, how nice of you to join us. We were just discussing the petition I am organizing. I have been going door to door, and I am happy to report that I already have signatures from 38 households demanding that you remove those monstrosities from your roof. My mouth went dry. There were only 82 houses in Meadowbrook Estates. She had nearly half the neighborhood already. You cannot force me to remove legally installed, HOA-approved solar panels, Linda. Actually, I can. Section 12. Paragraph 4 of the HOA bylaws states that any modification deemed detrimental to the community's aesthetic standards can be reversed by a 2/3 vote of the board. And with this petition, I will call an emergency board meeting and have those panels gone within the month. The architectural committee already approved them, I repeated, trying to keep my voice steady. You cannot just override that decision because you personally do not like how they look. Watch me, she said sweetly. Then she turned back to the crowd. As you can see, James is unwilling to be reasonable. He cares more about his own convenience than our community. That is why I need all of your support. Sign the petition, come to the emergency meeting next Tuesday, and let us send a message that Meadowbrook Estates has standards. The crowd murmured agreement, and I felt my face flush hot with anger and embarrassment. Mrs. Rodriguez avoided my eyes. Tom Chen from the corner house, no relation, despite the shared last name, gave me an apologetic shrug but did not speak up. One by one, they drifted away, leaving me standing alone on my lawn while Linda smiled triumphantly. This is not over, I said quietly. You are absolutely right, Linda agreed. It is not over until those panels come down. Have a blessed day, James. She walked away, her designer heels clicking on the sidewalk, and I stood there feeling completely defeated. How had this happened? How had she turned the entire neighborhood against me so quickly? I had barely spoken to most of these people, and now they were signing petitions demanding I dismantle a legal, approved home improvement. I went back inside and did what I always did when stressed. I went to work. I had a major project due for a client in Seattle, a database redesign that required my full attention, but I could not focus. Every few minutes, I found myself staring out the window, watching neighbors walk by, wondering if they had signed Linda's petition. Around noon, my phone rang. It was David Huang, one of the 3 other members of the HOA board besides Linda. James, hey, I just wanted to give you a heads up. Linda called an emergency board meeting for next Tuesday. She has this petition and is pushing hard to force you to remove the solar panels. Can she actually do that? I asked, even though I was pretty sure I knew the answer. David sighed. Technically, yes. If she can show that a significant portion of the community objects and can argue that the panels violate aesthetic standards, the board can override the architectural committee's approval. It is a rarely used provision, but it exists. That is insane. I did everything right. I got approval. I got permits. This is just her on a power trip. I know, man, I know. For what it is worth, I am not going to vote to make you take them down, but Linda is very persuasive and she has been the HOA president for 6 years. The other board members usually just go along with what she wants. Who are the other board members? Margaret Finch and Robert Dalton. Margaret is generally reasonable, but she is also friends with Linda. They have been doing yoga together or something. Robert just does whatever creates the least conflict. If Linda pushes hard enough and shows up with enough angry neighbors, he will fold. After we hung up, I spent the rest of the afternoon researching. I pulled up the HOA bylaws, all 83 pages of them, and read through every single provision. David was right. There was a clause that allowed the board to reverse architectural approvals if they could demonstrate significant community opposition and aesthetic harm. The language was vague enough that Linda could probably make it work if she really wanted to. But there had to be something I could use to fight back. I read deeper, taking notes. And that was when I found something interesting. Section 27 detailed the HOA's financial requirements. The board was required to conduct an annual audit of all accounts, provide detailed financial statements to homeowners upon request, and maintain complete transparency about how dues were being spent. I frowned. In the 8 months I had lived here, I had never seen any financial statements. The HOA meetings I had attended had not included any budget discussions or expense reports. On a hunch, I started digging through the HOA website. It was basic, mostly just a calendar of events and copies of the rules. There was a section labeled Financial Documents, but when I clicked on it, I got an error message. I tried again, same error. I cleared my cache and tried a third time. The page loaded, but it was completely empty except for a single line of text. Financial statements available upon request to the HOA president. That was odd. The bylaws said statements should be readily available. Why would I need to request them personally from Linda? Unless there was something she did not want people seeing. I drafted a careful email to Linda, citing Section 27 of the bylaws and formally requesting copies of all financial statements for the past 3 years, including bank statements, receipts for major expenses, and the results of the required annual audits. I sent it off, copied David and the other board members for good measure, and then tried to get back to work. Linda's response came 47 minutes later. Dear James, financial statements are provided at the annual meeting each January. If you had attended, you would have received them. The next annual meeting will be in 10 months. Regards, Linda Patterson, HOA President. I checked my records. The January annual meeting this year had been held on January 15th. I had not moved into the neighborhood until February 3rd. And regardless, the bylaws said statements should be available upon request, not once a year whether you can attend a specific meeting or not. I wrote back, pointing this out politely but firmly. Her response was terse. The board will consider your request at the next regular meeting in April. Until then, please focus on preparing to remove your solar panels as the community has requested. Something was definitely wrong. I could feel it in my gut. This was not just about her being difficult. She was actively blocking me from seeing the HOA's finances, which made no sense unless she had something to hide. The following Monday, 5 days before the emergency meeting about my solar panels, I got a letter in the mail from the HOA. It was a formal notice of violation. According to Linda's letter, I was being fined $250 for maintaining an unapproved exterior modification. The solar panels. She was fining me for the panels that had been approved. I took a photo of the letter and the Architectural Committee's approval and posted both to the Meadowbrook Estates Facebook group. Can anyone explain how I'm being fined for something that was approved? I wrote. This seems like harassment. The responses were mixed. A few people expressed sympathy, saying Linda had gone too far. But more people piled on, commenting about how the panels were ugly, how I should have known they would be controversial, how I was being selfish. Several comments clearly came from Linda's friends, using almost identical language about community standards and property values. One person, Jennifer Mills, went so far as to say I was destroying the neighborhood and that I should just sell my house and move somewhere else if I did not like the rules. That night, I barely slept. The emergency meeting was tomorrow, and I had no real defense except that I had followed all the rules, which apparently did not matter if Linda decided she did not like something. Tuesday evening arrived too quickly. The meeting was held at the community center, a nice building with a kitchen and a large meeting room. I arrived 15 minutes early, hoping to talk to some of the board members before things started. Margaret Finch was already there, setting up folding chairs. She was in her 60s, thin and elegant with silver hair cut in a neat bob. Margaret, can I talk to you for a minute? I asked. She looked uncomfortable but nodded. I know what you are going to say, James, and I want you to know I do think Linda is being a bit harsh about this. But I have to consider what the community wants. The community does not even know what they want. Linda told them the panels hurt property values, which is not true. She is spreading misinformation to turn people against me. I do not know about all that. What I know is that I have had a lot of neighbors express concerns. Real concerns. This is not just Linda making things up. Did Linda request financial statements from you? I tried, changing tactics. Margaret blinked, clearly caught off guard. What? No, why would she request statements from me? Not her requesting them, me. I formally requested copies of the HOA's financial records 2 weeks ago. Linda refused to provide them. Do you know why that would be? I do not handle the finances. Linda manages all of that. She is very organized. I am sure if there is a delay, it is just because she is busy. The bylaws say records should be available upon request. Well, I do not know about that. You will have to take it up with Linda. Now, if you will excuse me, I need to finish setting up. People started arriving 20 minutes later. A lot of people. Way more than usually attended HOA meetings. Linda had clearly promoted this heavily. I recognized faces from around the neighborhood, most of whom I had only seen in passing. They filed in, many of them giving me unfriendly looks as they found seats. Linda arrived exactly on time, wearing a navy blue blazer and white blouse, carrying a leather portfolio. She looked like she was about to chair a corporate board meeting, not an HOA gathering in suburban Arizona. The meeting was called to order at 7 p.m. sharp. Linda stood at the front of the room, the other 3 board members seated at a table beside her. She smiled warmly at the assembled crowd, easily 50 or 60 people packed into the space. Thank you all so much for coming tonight. It means the world to me to see such strong community participation. Tonight, we are here to address a matter that affects every single one of us. As you know, one of our residents, James Chen, installed large solar panels on his roof without proper consideration for how they would impact our neighborhood's appearance and property values. I got approval, I said loudly from my seat near the back. This is in the record. Linda's smile did not waver. The architectural committee gave preliminary approval, yes. However, they did not have the full picture of how intrusive these panels would be. Now that we can all see them, it is clear they do not meet Meadowbrook Estates standards. That is why I have spent the past 3 weeks talking to you, my neighbors, listening to your concerns. And the response has been overwhelming. I have a petition here with signatures from 64 households, representing over 75% of our community, requesting that these panels be removed. There was applause. Actual applause. I felt sick. This is ridiculous, I said, standing up. You cannot just take away an approved modification because you decided after the fact that you do not like it. That is not how this works. Please sit down, James, Linda said, her voice taking on a condescending tone. You will have a chance to speak when it is your turn. Right now, I am presenting the petition to the board. She turned to David, Margaret, and Robert. As you can see, the community has spoken clearly. I move that we vote to require the removal of the solar panels at James Chen's property within 60 days, with the cost of removal to be borne by Mr. Chen. Do I have a second? Second, Robert Dalton said immediately. He was a balding man in his 50s who looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. Discussion, David asked, and I silently thanked him for at least trying to slow this down. I think we need to be careful here, David said. James did go through the proper channels. He got approval, setting a precedent that we can just reverse approvals because people complain after the fact seems problematic. What is to stop someone from coming after any modification they do not like? The difference, Linda said smoothly, is that this modification is highly visible and impacts the entire street. And again, I want to emphasize we have over 75% of the community in agreement. This is not a small group of complainers. This is a clear community consensus. I would like to speak, I said. Linda looked annoyed but nodded. You have 3 minutes. I walked to the front of the room, my hands shaking slightly. Public speaking was not my thing, but I had to try. I bought my home here 8 months ago because I thought this was a good community with fair rules. I have followed every single rule. I got approval before installing my solar panels. I hired licensed contractors. I pulled city permits. I did everything right. And now I am being told that none of that matters because the HOA president decided she does not like how they look. This is not about what I like, Linda interrupted. This is about community standards. Let me finish, please. You told everyone that solar panels hurt property values. That is not true. The National Renewable Energy Laboratory did a study showing homes with solar panels sell for 4% more on average. You lied to people to get them to sign your petition. There were murmurs in the crowd. Linda's face flushed red. I did not lie. I had a local realtor assess the impact, and she confirmed values would decline. Which realtor? Can you provide documentation of that assessment? I do not need to provide you with anything. The petition speaks for itself. And the financial records, I pressed, sensing an opening. I requested those weeks ago. Why have you refused to provide them? That is completely unrelated to tonight's meeting, Linda snapped. And I have not refused. I explained that records are distributed at the annual meeting. The bylaws say they should be available upon request, not once a year. Upon request, I am formally requesting them again right now in front of all these witnesses. David leaned forward. Linda, he has a point. If James requested financial records, we should provide them. Is there a reason we cannot do that? We can and will provide them at the appropriate time. Tonight is about the solar panels. Stop trying to derail this meeting, James. But the seed was planted. I could see people whispering to each other, looking confused. Why was Linda being so defensive about the financial records? I pressed harder. I looked up the bylaws. The HOA is supposed to conduct annual audits. When was the last audit done? Linda's jaw tightened. We have audits done regularly. This is not the time or place for this discussion. Actually, Margaret said slowly, when was our last audit? I do not remember seeing one since I joined the board. I handle all of that, Linda said, her voice rising slightly. And it is all in order. Can we please get back to the matter at hand? I think we should table the vote on the solar panels, David said. At least until we can review the financial records and confirm everything is properly documented. If there are questions about how the HOA is being run, we need to address those first. I am not tabling anything, Linda said. We have 64 signatures demanding action. We are voting tonight. I am making a motion to table, David said firmly. Do I have a second? Margaret hesitated, then nodded. Second. Linda looked furious. Fine. All in favor of tabling the vote on the solar panels, David and Margaret raised their hands. Robert looked between them and Linda nervously, then slowly raised his hand as well. Motion passes, David said. Linda, I am also formally requesting, as a board member, that you provide complete financial records for review by the full board within 7 days. That is not a request. That is a requirement under the bylaws. The room erupted in conversation. People were confused, asking their neighbors what was happening. Linda gathered her portfolio, her hands shaking with rage. This meeting is adjourned, she announced, then walked out without another word. I caught up with David in the parking lot. Thank you, I mean it, thank you. Do not thank me yet, I just bought you time. But James, if there is nothing wrong with the finances, this is just going to come back around. She will get those panels removed eventually unless you can prove she is up to something. There is something wrong, I said. I can feel it. She was way too defensive. Then find it, fast, because you have got maybe a week before she figures out how to turn this around on you. I spent the next 2 days barely sleeping, diving deep into everything I could find about the HOA's finances. It was not much. The last financial statement posted on the website was from 3 years ago. It showed total assets of about $89,000, which made sense. With 82 homes paying $200 per month, that was almost $200,000 per year in revenue. Some of that went to landscaping, pool maintenance, utilities for the community center, insurance, and other regular expenses. But there should still be a healthy reserve fund. I filed a formal complaint with the Arizona Department of Real Estate, which oversees HOAs in the state. I explained that the HOA president was refusing to provide financial records as required by law. They said they would open an investigation but warned me it could take weeks or months. I did not have weeks or months. Linda was probably working right now to find a way to push through the solar panel vote despite the delay. On Thursday morning, I was outside watering my plants when Tom Chen from the corner house walked over. We had chatted a few times, mostly just neighborly small talk about the weather and the Phoenix Suns basketball season. "Hey James, you got a minute?" he asked. "Sure, what is up?" Tom looked uncomfortable. "Look, I signed Linda's petition about your solar panels, and after Tuesday's meeting, I am feeling pretty bad about that. She told us they were going to tank property values, and I did not really question it. But then you brought up the financial stuff, and she completely freaked out. That was weird, right?" "Really weird," I agreed. "She has been blocking me from seeing any financial records for weeks." "Yeah, so I started thinking about it. I have been in this neighborhood for 4 years. Linda has always been super controlling about everything, but I have never seen detailed information about where our money goes. We pay dues every month, but it is just like, trust me, everything is fine." "Exactly. And when I push for transparency, she acts like I am attacking her personally." Tom nodded slowly. "My wife works at a bank. She deals with fraud cases sometimes, and she said that the way Linda is acting is like a huge red flag. People who are hiding financial crimes get really aggressive and defensive when you ask questions about money." "Do you think you could ask your wife what I should be looking for? Like, if Linda is doing something illegal, what would it look like?" "I can ask. But James, be careful. If Linda is actually doing something shady and you expose her, she is going to come after you hard." "She is already coming after me hard. I might as well fight back." That evening, Tom texted me a long message from his wife, Sarah. She said that in HOA fraud cases, the most common schemes involved fake vendors. The president would create invoices for services that were never actually performed, or inflate the cost of real services and pocket the difference. She suggested I look at major expenses: landscaping, pool maintenance, repairs to common areas. Compare what the HOA claimed to pay versus what those services should actually cost. The problem was, I still did not have access to the HOA's financial records. Linda had not responded to David's demand for documents, and the 7-day deadline was approaching. On Saturday, I attended the community pool, which was busy with families enjoying the mild Arizona weather. I struck up a conversation with a guy named Marcus who lived on the opposite side of the development. I mentioned that I was frustrated with the HOA, and he laughed. "Join the club, man. I swear we pay $200 a month and I have no idea where it goes. The pool is always running out of towels, the landscaping looks okay but nothing special. Meanwhile, Linda drives a brand new Mercedes and takes like 4 vacations a year." I felt a chill. "How do you know about her vacations?" She posts about them constantly on Facebook. Hawaii, Cabo, some cruise to Alaska. She is always traveling. And I remember thinking, how does an HOA president afford that? It is a volunteer position. "What does she do for work?" Marcus shrugged. "No idea." "I do not think she works. Her husband died like 8 years ago, heart attack or something. She has been living off his life insurance, I guess." I went home and did something I was not entirely proud of. I looked up Linda's Facebook profile. She had her privacy settings pretty loose so I could see most of her posts, and Marcus was right. In just the past 18 months, she had posted photos from Hawaii twice, Cabo San Lucas, a cruise to Alaska, a trip to New York City, and a week in Palm Springs. Each trip looked expensive. 5-star resorts, fancy restaurants, first-class flights based on the photos. I did some rough math. An HOA president position was unpaid. If she was not working and living off life insurance from 8 years ago, how was she funding this lifestyle? The house in Meadowbrook Estates was nice but not extravagant. Based on comparable sales, it was worth maybe $450,000. If her husband's life insurance had paid out, say, $500,000, and she had been living on it for 8 years while also taking all these expensive trips, she should be running low on funds. Unless she had another income source, or unless she was stealing from the HOA. On Monday, the 7-day deadline for Linda to produce financial records came and went with no response. David called another emergency board meeting for Wednesday, this time specifically about the financial records issue. Linda tried to cancel it, but David, Margaret, and Robert outvoted her. The meeting was on. I spent Tuesday preparing. I printed out screenshots of Linda's Facebook posts showing her expensive vacations. I created a spreadsheet estimating the costs based on the resorts and activities she had posted about. I compiled everything I could find about average costs for HOA services, landscaping, pool maintenance, insurance. And I brought copies of the bylaws with the sections about financial transparency highlighted. Wednesday evening, I arrived at the community center early again. This time, though, the crowd was much smaller. Only about 20 people showed up, mostly folks who were genuinely interested in the financial question rather than people coming to yell about solar panels. Linda looked tired. She had dark circles under her eyes and her hair was not as perfectly styled as usual. When David called the meeting to order, she barely looked up. "Linda, it has been 7 days since we requested complete financial records," David said. "Where are they?" "I have been working on compiling everything," Linda said. "It is a lot of documentation. It should not take 7 days to print bank statements and receipts. What is the delay? I am trying to organize things in a way that makes sense. Some of the records are at my house, some are in the storage unit we rent for HOA documents. It is taking time." "We rent a storage unit," Margaret asked. "Since when, for the past 3 years, we needed more space for records. How much does that cost?" David pressed. Linda shuffled papers. "I do not have that information with me right now." "Linda, this is unacceptable," David said. "You have been president for 6 years. You should be able to access basic financial information immediately. The fact that you cannot is raising serious concerns. Are you accusing me of something?" Linda snapped. "Because I have given 6 years of my life to this community, I have volunteered countless hours, and this is the thanks I get, accusations and suspicion." "Nobody is accusing you of anything," Margaret said gently. "We just need to see the records. It is required by law." "I have a question," I said, standing up. "Linda, you do not work, correct? The HOA president position is volunteer." Linda's eyes locked on me with pure hatred. "That is none of your business." "Actually, it kind of is. Because I have been wondering how you afford such an expensive lifestyle on no income. According to your Facebook posts, you have taken 7 major vacations in the past 18 months. I estimated the costs. We are talking at least $60,000, probably more." The room went silent. Linda's face had gone pale. "How dare you stalk my social media and my personal finances? That is completely inappropriate. Your social media is public, and I am not asking about your personal finances. I am asking how those finances connect to HOA funds that may be missing." "There are no missing funds," Linda said, but her voice was shaking now. David leaned forward. "Linda, I am going to ask you directly. Have you taken any money from HOA accounts for personal use?" "Absolutely not. This is outrageous." "Then prove it. Show us the bank statements right now." "You can access them online if you do not have paper copies. Take out your phone, log into the HOA bank account and show us the transactions." Linda stood up abruptly. "I do not have to prove anything to you people. I am the president. I have managed these finances perfectly for 6 years. If you do not trust me, then maybe I should just resign and let you all figure it out yourselves." "Maybe you should," I said. Linda grabbed her purse and stormed toward the door, but David moved quickly, stepping into her path. Linda, wait. If you leave right now without providing any documentation, I am going to have to report this to the state. This is not personal. This is about legal compliance. Get out of my way, David. I am also going to have to freeze the HOA bank accounts pending an investigation. That is within my authority as vice president if I have reason to suspect financial irregularities. Linda's hand shook as she clutched her purse. For a moment, I thought she might actually break down, then her face hardened. Fine, you want to see the accounts? Here. She pulled out her phone, tapped at it aggressively, then shoved it toward David. He took it and looked at the screen. His expression changed immediately. Linda, this shows a current balance of $12,000. According to our last filed statement, we should have over $80,000 in reserves. There have been expenses, Linda said. What expenses could possibly account for $68,000? The roof repair on the community center, new pool equipment, landscaping upgrades. When did we repair the community center roof? Margaret asked. I do not remember approving that. It was an emergency repair. I had to authorize it quickly. Show me the invoice, David said. I do not have it with me. Linda, David said quietly, I am looking at these transactions. There are dozens of transfers to personal accounts. Your personal accounts, I assume. The silence in the room was deafening. Linda's face crumbled. Those were reimbursements for expenses I paid out of pocket. $68,000 in reimbursements for what? Various things. Office supplies, mileage, equipment. I could not believe what I was hearing. She had actually done it. She had stolen tens of thousands of dollars from the HOA, and now she was caught. I am calling the police, David said, pulling out his own phone. Wait, Linda said desperately. Wait, please. I can explain. I can pay it back. You stole from us, someone in the audience said, a woman I recognized from a few houses down. You stole our money and then tried to destroy James over solar panels to distract everyone. I did not steal. I borrowed. I was going to pay it back. That is still theft, David said. He was already dialing. Linda sank back into her chair, her face in her hands. Within 15 minutes, 2 Gilbert Police Department officers arrived. David explained the situation, showing them the bank statements on Linda's phone and the bylaws requiring financial transparency. The officers asked Linda to come with them to the station to answer questions. Am I under arrest? Linda asked weakly. Not yet, one of the officers said. But we need to get a full statement and contact our financial crimes unit. You should probably call a lawyer. As they led Linda out, she looked at me one last time. This is your fault, she hissed. You could not just take down the panels, you had to ruin everything. You ruined it yourself, I said after they left. The remaining 20 people in the meeting room sat in stunned silence. Finally, Margaret spoke. I had no idea. I swear I had no idea she was doing this. None of us did, David said. She kept tight control of everything. That was the whole point. He looked at me. James, I owe you an apology. She went after you because you were asking the right questions. The solar panel thing was just an excuse to discredit you and distract everyone from the real issue. So what happens now? I asked. Now we file a formal complaint with the police, cooperate with their investigation, and try to recover whatever funds we can. We will also need to elect a new president and completely restructure how we handle finances. This should never have been allowed to happen. Over the following weeks, the full scope of Linda's fraud emerged. The police financial crimes unit traced transactions going back 4 years. She had stolen approximately $87,000 from the HOA accounts through a combination of fake invoices, inflated expense reimbursements, and direct transfers to her personal accounts. She had created several shell companies with names like Meadowbrook Maintenance Services and Arizona Pool Solutions, billing the HOA for services that were either never performed or were actually done by legitimate contractors for much less money. She would then write HOA checks to these fake companies, deposit them in accounts she controlled, and pocket the difference. The Hawaii trips, the cruises, the fancy dinners all funded with stolen HOA money. Her husband's life insurance had run out 3 years ago, and rather than get a job, she had simply started treating the HOA like her personal bank account. The state's investigation confirmed that no audits had been performed in over 5 years, despite the bylaws requiring annual audits. Linda had forged audit documents and provided them to the board, but nobody had verified they were real. She had also violated multiple provisions of Arizona's HOA statutes regarding financial transparency and record-keeping. In late April, Linda was formally charged with fraud, theft, and forgery. The prosecution laid out 19 separate counts. She pleaded not guilty initially, claiming the transfers were legitimate business expenses, but the evidence was overwhelming. Her lawyer eventually negotiated a plea deal. Linda pleaded guilty to theft and fraud charges and agreed to pay full restitution of $87,000 plus interest and penalties. She was sentenced to 3 years in prison, though the judge allowed her to serve the first year and then be eligible for parole if she made significant progress on restitution. The HOA held an emergency election in May. David Huang was elected as the new president. One of his first acts was to implement completely new financial controls, including quarterly audits by an independent accountant, monthly financial statements posted publicly, and a requirement that at least 2 board members approve any expenditure over $1,000. As for my solar panels, the issue was quietly dropped. At the first board meeting under David's leadership, someone made a motion to formally affirm the Architectural Committee's original approval. It passed unanimously. Several neighbors who had signed Linda's petition stopped by my house over the following weeks to apologize. They had been manipulated, they explained. Linda had lied to them about property values and played on their fears to get signatures. Now that the truth was out, they felt terrible. Tom Chen and his wife Sarah became good friends. We started having regular barbecues, and Tom joked that I should run for the HOA board since I was clearly good at uncovering corruption. I politely declined. I had had enough HOA drama to last a lifetime. The community slowly recovered from the scandal. The stolen money was particularly painful because it meant we had to increase monthly dues temporarily to rebuild the reserve fund while also pursuing restitution from Linda. But there was also a sense of relief. For years, Linda had run Meadowbrook Estates like her personal fiefdom, and people had just accepted it because challenging her seemed too difficult. Now, with everything out in the open, the HOA actually functioned the way it was supposed to as a democratic organization focused on maintaining the community, not enriching one person. In June, I was outside installing some new landscape lighting when David stopped by. "You have got a minute?" He asked. "Sure, what is up?" "I just wanted to thank you again. If you had not pushed so hard on the financial records, Linda would still be stealing from us. She probably would have drained the accounts completely before anyone noticed." "I was just defending my solar panels," I said with a smile. "The fraud thing was a bonus. Still, you did not have to keep pushing when it would have been easier to just give up and take the panels down. A lot of people would have. Those panels cost $15,000. There was no way I was taking them down because some HOA president had a power trip." David laughed. "Fair enough. Anyway, I also wanted to let you know that we recovered Linda's Mercedes. It turns out she had bought it with HOA funds too, routing the payment through one of her fake companies. The court ordered it seized as part of restitution. We are selling it and putting the money back in the reserve fund." "Good. She does not deserve to keep anything she bought with stolen money." "Agreed. Oh, and one more thing. The State Department of Real Estate is using our case as an example in their HOA fraud prevention training. They said it is a textbook example of what happens when there is no financial oversight. So at least something good came out of this mess. As summer arrived and temperatures climbed into the hundreds, my solar panels proved their worth. My electric bill for July, traditionally the most expensive month in Arizona, was $36. My neighbors were paying upwards of $300. Several people asked me about the installation process and whether I would recommend my contractor. By August, 4 other houses on my street had solar panels installed. Linda would have been furious. I found that fact deeply satisfying. In September, I attended the HOA annual meeting, this time actually the annual meeting, not an emergency session about scandal or theft. It was boring. Wonderfully, beautifully boring. We discussed pool hours, approved a budget for replanting some palm trees that had died, and voted on whether to allow residents to install Ring doorbells without architectural approval. The motion passed. Nobody accused anyone of fraud. Nobody organized petitions. Nobody threatened anyone. It was exactly what an HOA meeting should be. As I walked home that evening, I thought about everything that had happened. 10 months ago, I had moved into what I thought would be a quiet neighborhood where I could work remotely and enjoy Arizona's weather in peace. Instead, I had ended up exposing major financial crimes and helping send an HOA president to prison. It was not the retirement from drama I had been hoping for after my divorce. But there was something satisfying about it too. Linda had tried to destroy me over solar panels, rallied the entire community against me, and made my life miserable for months. She had done it all to distract from her crimes and maintain her power. And in the end, her own greed and defensiveness had been her downfall. If she had just left me alone, if she had approved the solar panels, or at least not made such a huge issue out of them, I probably never would have started asking questions about the HOA finances. She had created her own worst enemy by choosing me as a target. The following February marked a year since I had moved to Meadowbrook Estates. David organized a community barbecue to celebrate the HOA's fresh start under new leadership. Over 100 people attended, grilling burgers and hot dogs, kids playing in the pool, neighbors actually talking and laughing together instead of gossiping about violations and petitions. I was manning one of the grills when Margaret Finch approached me. She had remained on the board under David's presidency, but had taken on a much less prominent role. "James, I wanted to say something I should have said months ago. I am sorry. I should have questioned Linda's numbers about your property values. I should have asked to see financial records before that meeting. I just trusted her because she had been president so long, and that was wrong." "Water under the bridge," I said, flipping a burger. "We all learned from this. Still, you were right and I was wrong. And you paid the price for that while Linda was stealing from all of us. So thank you for not giving up. You are welcome." As the sun set over Meadowbrook Estates that evening, the community looked beautiful. The palm trees were lit with string lights David's committee had approved. The pool sparkled, properly maintained now that legitimate contractors were doing the work. Families laughed and talked on their perfectly manicured lawns. It looked like a postcard for suburban Arizona living. And on my roof, my solar panels gleamed in the fading light, generating power and saving me money with every hour of sunlight. They had caused me months of stress, turned me into a neighborhood pariah, and ultimately exposed massive fraud. But they had been worth every penny and every moment of conflict, because at the end of the day, I had been right. About the panels, about the financial records, about Linda. Sometimes standing your ground and refusing to be bullied leads to outcomes you never expected. Sometimes asking uncomfortable questions exposes uncomfortable truths, and sometimes the person attacking you the hardest is the one with the most to hide. Linda was scheduled for her first parole hearing in about 6 months. The word in the neighborhood was that she would likely be denied. She had barely made a dent in the restitution payments, and prosecutors had indicated they would argue strongly against early release. She would probably serve at least 2 full years before seeing freedom again. 2 years to think about how her greed and need for control had destroyed everything. I did not take any pleasure in her imprisonment. I was not that kind of person, But I also did not feel bad about it. She had made her choices. She had stolen from her neighbors, lied to them, manipulated them, and tried to ruin me when I got too close to the truth. The consequences were entirely her own fault. As for me, life in Gilbert continued peacefully. My work projects went well. I started dating someone I met through Tom and Sarah. I even adopted a dog, a rescue mutt named Cisco, who loved sunbathing under the solar panels. The HOA approved my fence installation without any drama, a process that took all of 2 weeks from application to completion. Meadowbrook Estates had learned its lessons. Financial transparency was now paramount. Board meetings were recorded and posted online. Decisions were made democratically, with actual discussion and debate rather than one person dictating everything. It was not perfect, HOAs never are, but it was functional and fair. Sometimes I would drive past Linda's house, which had been sold to cover part of her restitution. A young couple with twin babies had bought it. They had painted the front door a cheerful yellow and installed solar panels. I smiled every time I saw those panels. The neighborhood had moved on. Linda Patterson, the HOA president who had ruled Meadowbrook Estates with an iron fist for 6 years, had become a cautionary tale. New residents would hear the story and shake their heads in disbelief. How could one person steal so much for so long? How did nobody notice? The answers were complicated but ultimately simple. Lack of oversight, too much trust, and one person's willingness to abuse power for personal gain. But the story also had a hero, though I never thought of myself that way. It had someone who refused to back down when bullied, who asked the right questions even when it was uncomfortable, who stood up for what was right even when the entire community seemed to be against him. That person was me. And while I had not set out to be a hero or expose fraud, I had done what needed to be done. My solar panels continued to generate power day after day, month after month. They had paid for themselves in controversy and revelation long before they would pay for themselves in electricity savings. Every time I looked at them, I remembered the petition, the meetings, Linda's red face as she yelled about property values and community standards. I remembered her being led away by police, the shocked silence in the community center, the slow revelation of just how deep her crimes had gone. And I remembered that sometimes the people who try hardest to appear righteous and community-minded are hiding the darkest secrets. Linda had wrapped herself in the language of property values and neighborhood standards, positioning herself as a guardian of Meadowbrook Estates. In reality, she had been its greatest threat, stealing from the very people she claimed to protect. The whole experience had changed me in small ways. I was more skeptical now, more willing to ask difficult questions. I paid attention to how organizations were run, whether money was being spent appropriately, whether people in power were being held accountable. These were lessons Linda had taught me, though certainly not intentionally. I also learned about community. In the beginning, I had felt isolated, with nearly the entire neighborhood signing a petition against me. But once the truth came out, those same neighbors apologized, became friends, invited me to barbecues and game nights. People were not inherently bad. They had just been lied to by someone they trusted. When presented with the truth, most of them made the right choice. As I write this, it is now late 2026, almost 2 full years since I installed those controversial solar panels. Linda is still in prison, denied parole twice now because she continues to insist she did nothing seriously wrong. The full $87,000 plus interest has been recovered through the sale of her house, her car, and garnishment of a small inheritance she received from a relative. The HOA reserve fund is healthy again. Dues were returned to their original $200 per month after the temporary increase ended. David remains HOA president and does an excellent job. Margaret is still on the board and has become a fierce advocate for financial transparency, perhaps overcompensating for her earlier blind trust in Linda. Robert Dalton resigned from the board, saying he just wanted to live his life without the drama. I understood that completely. My relationship with Sarah Chen's cousin developed into something serious, and we are talking about moving in together. She loves the house, loves the neighborhood, and thinks the solar panel saga is hilarious now that it is safely in the past. She jokes that she is dating a detective who uncovered financial fraud while just trying to save on electricity. The 4 other houses that installed solar panels after mine have become part of the neighborhood landscape. Nobody complains about them anymore. They are just another feature of modern homeownership, like Ring doorbells and electric car chargers. The controversy that consumed months of my life and destroyed Linda's freedom has faded into irrelevance, but I will never forget it. I will never forget watching Linda rally support so fast, collecting 64 signatures in just 3 weeks. I will never forget the emergency meeting where it seemed certain I would be forced to remove $15,000 worth of equipment. I will never forget the moment David looked at her phone and realized what she had done. And I will never forget the look on her face as the police led her away, the shock and anger and disbelief that her carefully constructed scheme had collapsed so completely. She rallied support fast. Faster than I thought possible. She organized a petition against me, turned the community into a weapon, and tried to destroy me for having the audacity to question her authority. And then I exposed her tax fraud and embezzlement, bringing down her entire house of cards. It was not how I expected my first year in Gilbert, Arizona to go. But life rarely follows our expectations. Sometimes you move to a quiet suburb looking for peace, and instead you end up taking down a corrupt HOA president. Sometimes you install solar panels to save money on electricity, and instead you save your community from ongoing theft. Sometimes standing up for yourself leads to standing up for everyone. The solar panels on my roof continue to generate power as I type this. Cisco is asleep at my feet. Through the window, I can see my neighbors going about their evening routines. Meadowbrook Estates looks peaceful, prosperous, and well-managed. It looks like a place where people follow the rules, treat each other fairly, and work together for the common good. It looks that way because Linda Patterson is not here anymore, because her corruption was exposed and stopped, because one person refused to be bullied into compliance and instead asked the questions nobody else was asking. That person was me. And while I paid a price in stress and conflict, I would make the same choices again. Because doing the right thing is not always easy. Sometimes it is messy and complicated and makes you unpopular, but it is still right. The story of HOA Karen, who organized a petition against me, then got exposed for tax fraud, has a proper ending now. The villain faced justice. The community recovered. The hero, if I can call myself that without cringing, got to keep his solar panels and found peace. It is not the ending Linda wanted when she first knocked on my door to complain about those panels. But it is the ending she deserved. And it is the ending Meadowbrook Estates needed. Justice, transparency, and accountability prevailed over corruption, manipulation, and greed. That is how the story ends.